Hello everybody, Keith here again. Going to do my first official CareCollab video with this one. And this is for Psychopsis, in this particular case Psychopsis Mariposa. This is the standard form, not the 3-lip form, which I happen to prefer, but that's neither here nor there. I'm sure the care is very similar. These are a moisture loving orchid, but having said that, there are all kinds of quirks with them that will make them tricky to somebody that's coming to them from scratch. But they are not, once you get the knack going, all that difficult to keep. This one sits on a windowsill most of the time. I have kept it in here in the conservatory from time to time, but it gets a little bit warm in here for a lot of plants, and if it's a moisture lover I tend to move it somewhere cooler. So for the summer period at the very least, this one sits on a southeast facing windowsill, and it seems perfectly happy. Typical of Psychopsis orchids, this one flowers and grows at the same time, and it's put out 3 new growths this year, and you can tell the new growths in particular because they're mottled. So you can see with the mottling on that one, this one it's beginning to fade now, this one's gone out, and then we've got this one right the way around the back, which hasn't even started opening just yet. So there's that. Now they are again a bit quirky about where they put out new growths, because they seem to stick them out anywhere. There's at least 2 growing points on here that I know of, and it just pokes them out from here, there and everywhere, and you end up with a real tangle with pseudobulbs stacked on top of the others if you're not very careful. But that's the way it grows, so there's not a lot you can do about it. It had this flower spike when I bought it. That would be about October 2019, I think. And this one, again, as typical with Psychopsis, it simply keeps extending, and every time you get a flower, you get a second node forming underneath it. I don't know how well you're going to see that. Where are we? I moved that. You see that little green thing underneath? That will be the next point of growth. Now then, quirks. It likes moisture, it does not like to be wet. When I got it, it was in the peaty soil type compost that a lot of these orchids come in from abroad, and I repotted it because I don't like moisture into something that had a lot of moss in, and I've got repotting videos for this going right back. I think I'll check through, and if I have I'll put some links. When I first did it though, assuming it wanted moisture, I made 2 mistakes. One was put far too much moss in with it, so it stayed wet for 2 or 3 weeks, didn't need watering, and it didn't like that. It completely stalled. The other thing it did was rot one of the new growths it had. It had 2 new growths and one of them rotted, and these rot like lightning. Why? Because the pseudobulb was getting damp. The pseudobulb itself was getting damp. And for some reason, and I don't understand it, but then again, I'm not a botanist, I was a mechanical cum mining engineer. They like moisture, they don't like to have the pseudobulbs wet. The pseudobulbs always grow at the top of the media, and you never ever, when you repot them, you never ever bury a pseudo bulb. Now, let's see whether we can get this. I hope we can. But down here, I hope you can see that these pseudo bulbs have gone black. That's because when I repotted it this time, I buried them and they started to go black quite quickly. Now, as soon as I scraped the media away and these were out in the air, the colour change stopped. And these pseudo bulbs are quite hard, there's no sign of rot or anything like that, but they don't like to have wet pseudo bulbs. They particularly don't like to have wet up where the leaf joins the pseudo bulb. That really will upset them. So what did I do when it was staying wet too long? Well, I did two things. One, probably the most important, was I got my soldering iron and I absolutely peppered this pot with holes. And that helped a very great deal. The other thing I did was, instead of dunking the pot, which is what I do with virtually all my other orchids, with this one and one or two others that have a similar kind of a not so much a wet-dry cycle, which you hear a lot with orchids, but a wet-damp cycle, is I pour some water through it, knowing that we've got moss in here. You don't need to dunk it. The moss will absorb the moisture and give it what it needs. So I trickle water through it until it starts to come through the bottom, and once it's doing that, I stop. And I try to play with that a little bit until I get it so whatever time of year I'm doing it, it dries out in about a week to 10 days, and this thing will be quite happy. Any longer than that and it'll just stall, and if it gets too bad you'll kill it. But really they are very, very easy going. One thing I can't do is get it to put another spike up. I'd love to do that. It's got a number of new growths. It's quite a big plant now. I'd just love to see that. I suspect it wants more light, which I can't give it. It's getting as much as it can get, but it's doing fine as is. And I'm just, as these things keep going, and you see pictures of spikes on Psychopsis that are absolutely miles long. At the moment I'm okay. I'll worry about getting another spike in the future. But the fact it grows and blooms also means that I have to feed it slightly different to my other orchids. So I've got a red plant label in here, and you can see that one says bloom. That tells me the last time I watered this I used a bloom fertilizer, and the next couple of times I do it I'll feed it with growth fertilizer, and then it'll get flushed. But unlike most other orchids, you can't, the cycle is not as rigid, so because it's doing both at the same time, you've got to, I think, look after it. Now in terms of flowering, mine's got into a kind of a cycle. This flower started to open yesterday. These will come so that it's straighter, but not a lot straighter. It will flower for roughly 2 weeks, very roughly 2 weeks. Then the flower will simply dry up and drop off, and then nothing will happen very much apart from a bud developing for around about another month, and then it will open up, and the cycle will go around again. And while there isn't anything in flower, I tend to just feed it with growth food. As I say, I find this really quite easy to grow. I'm getting lots of new growths on it, but if you're careful for a few of these quirks, it's going to want something that's fairly water retentive, but not something that's so water retentive that it's going to sit and get wet. But I'm very pleased with this. Anyway, this, as I say, is my first official CareCollab video. I'll put a list of all the people that are doing Psychopsis videos in the description down below. So if I can find links to any other videos I've made about repotting this to give you a better idea. So I hope that's been of some kind of interest. They're not a cheap orchid, but I say if you get one and get it right, they're easy to grow. They really are. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye.